mentioned before the break, she was just killing him in the latest polls. 37% a couple days ago. 7 of the polls in Michigan were released in March. She led by 11 points, 13 points, 17, 24, 27, 28, 37. So what happened today?
Well, I know you know this, Megan. I'm the chair of the DNC, and so it's pretty much not my job to be analyzing why either one of our candidates is doing well or not so well. I do think it's important to note that we've had polls really this whole election cycle kind of all over the place on both sides of the aisle, and it sort of shows you that we're really a little too early in the election cycle to be really assuming that polls are extremely predictive, and anything can happen.
One follow-up for you on that, because looking at the Michigan exit polls, we're seeing something that we've seen in many states with her, which is very low numbers when it comes to those voters who value honesty and trustworthiness. If that was what you wanted in a candidate in Michigan, at least so far, you went 80% for Bernie Sanders, just 20% for Mrs. Clinton. Is this going to be an ongoing problem for her? Do you see it as a problem for her?
Well, I think when we get to the general election, no matter which one of our candidates are the Democratic nominee, they are going to be considered a heck of a lot more trustworthy when it comes to the future of our country and making sure that we can continue to build on the progress that we've had through 72 straight months of job growth in the private sector than any one of the jokers on the other side of the aisle who really have made an absolute utter mess of their party and of the process of running for president. God forbid any of that crowd actually would get into the White House, and I think that's how most Americans will feel.
Congresswoman, it's Bret Baier. Thanks for being with us. You know, about your party, and you're here as the chair of your party, Tulsi Gabbard, the congresswoman from Hawaii, resigned her position in leadership inside the DNC, saying that your party is stacking the deck for Hillary Clinton. How do you respond?
No, Bret, that's not what she said. You can go back and look at what she said. She was actually asked several times, multiple interviews, why she decided to resign, and she simply resigned because she wanted to support Bernie Sanders, and our rules don't allow for officers.
You don't think that she had any problem with the way you were handling it?
I don't, because she said that the reason that she resigned was specifically to support Bernie Sanders, and when asked specifically whether it had anything to do with anything else, she said no.
So when you see Bernie Sanders succeeding in a place like Michigan, what do you think?
Well, I think that both of our candidates have a really strong appeal to voters that want to make sure that we can reduce the income inequality gap, that we can make sure that people have an opportunity to reach the middle class. And if you look at what's going on the Republican side, we have Donald Trump, who says that we should ban an entire religion, we should build a wall and just, try to make another country pay for it, that we should deport 11 million immigrants who simply want to be here to make a better way of life for themselves, and who are talking about small hands and their manhood. I mean, really, we need to make sure that the Republicans at their next debate put a parental advisory warning on the screen before it starts, because they certainly aren't talking about the issues that are important to the American people. And they're being pretty vulgar in the process.
You know what the response to that on the other side is, which is, yes, it's gotten a little vulgar on the GOP side, but no one's facing the threat of indictment.
There's no one facing the threat of indictment on our side either, Megyn.
There's an open DOJ and FBI investigation into Mrs. Clinton right now.
Right. Let's not be melodramatic.
How is that melodramatic? Those are the facts.
Well, predicting that there's someone who is facing indictment is definitely
There was no prediction. There was a statement that there's no one on the GOP side who's under threat of indictment. That's what the Republicans say on this.
No. Instead, you have the Republican Party, who is being led right now by their front runner, who has a multi-bankrupted, absolutely outrageous, ridiculous position. This is a guy who has been alienating and has become a whirling dervish of extremism that the entire Republican Party that has been involved in the Republican Party for many years is absolutely flipping out over the possibility of him being the nominee, because they know that he will finish off the Republican Party. And those are the facts.
Even if that is true, all right? Even if all of that is true, that there's vulgarity and so on, and what you said, No one
Well, it
is
certainly is true.
investigating Donald Trump for a crime. No one's even suggesting he may be guilty of a felony. And that is the issue that, you tell me, we appear to be seeing in some of these exit polls when the Democrats, and this isn't even opening it up to the general election, the Democrats are asked whether they think that the Democratic frontrunner is an honest person.
At the end of the day, when the American people have an opportunity to decide who they want to be president of the United States, who they trust to make sure that we can continue to build on the economic progress that we've made, on the accomplishments we've made in adding 20 million people who didn't have health care before that now have it, on making sure that we can have access to affordable education, keep a roof over people's heads, and make sure we have a strong and secure retirement. Voters across America will choose one of our two candidates when one of them is the nominee over any one of the Republicans, because they know the Republicans would unravel all the progress we've made. That is what this election is going to be decided upon. And at the end of the day, there's a reason that the Democratic nominees won 5 out of the last 6 presidential elections, and it'll be 6 out of 7 after November.
Except right now, all of the Republican candidates still in this race beat Hillary Clinton in a head-to-head matchup, with the exception in a couple of polls of Donald Trump.
There are quite a few polls in which the reverse is true, Megyn, and at the end of the day, we're in March, and again, those polls are, you know, as good as the paper they're written on, because at the end of the day, when we get to November, voters are going to have a very clear and stark contrast, and they're going to choose to elect a Democrat because they know that Democrats have had their back.
Congresswoman, last thing. There is a clear and stark contrast in the number of people voting. There are many more Republicans showing up at the polls than there are Democrats as you look at the percentages of each state. As chair of your party, are you concerned about that?
No, because that's actually also not accurate. You have
you look at the
turnout
numbers
so far. I'm going to tell you the numbers. And the turnout so far, the Republicans have had about a 55% turnout, and we've had about 45%. And we have 2 candidates, and the Republicans have gone from 17 down to 4.
Sure, but you have to understand that the increase of voting from state to state, year to year, is increasing significantly on the Republican side and decreasing on the Democratic side.
Well, we have one of our candidates has actually gotten more votes than the Republican frontrunner has. And when you look at, based on our 2 candidates, much smaller field, and a field not led by a reality TV star who has talked about the size of his hands and his manhood, and just to try to keep things interesting, we have had a pretty small difference in the margin in turnout. So I'm not at all concerned. I'm confident that because we have a superior turnout operation, a digital and technological advantage, a centralized voter file that both of our candidates are feeding voter data into, that the Republicans simply don't have and never actually created, that we are going to be able to make sure that we win this election both on the ground, logistically, and on the issues.
Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, chair of the DNC, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, Donald Trump